Oh, right. I was just here relaxing, just trying to get my thoughts together.
You look sad.
Um, I'm going through some things, just like everybody else. You know who it is. It's ZEUS CRUZ, Olympian Multimedia, giving you another segment of Get Things Done. This segment, you look to me to, or follow me to my immediate right, we're going to be discussing about not so much literature per se as is, but to talk about where to derive inspiration. Remember, in a lot of past videos, I'm always talking about, especially in the confines of writing and putting your manuscripts together, putting your poetry together, that you want to pull from personal experiences, right? Or how about you pull from the world around you that surrounds you, the interaction that you have from people. But sometimes you need to look a little bit further, and you'd be surprised how you're able to pull some inspiration from other mediums. So I'm probably going to wow you today. Like, what I utilize as a medium to inspire me for my short stories and writing and poetry is, bam! You are looking at a comic book. And I know you're looking like, I know you guys are probably viewing, going to be like, man, comics? Are you serious? Like, I don't see the correlation there, Zeus. All right? When it comes to that. Comics, poetry, short stories. But believe it or not, it's not so much the correlation. It's about the elements provided within the comic book that I draw inspiration from. So comic books are really not that far off from short stories, to be honest. Really. If you look at most comic books, they're not really long in length. And then the dialogue that's being written within the comic book, it's pretty much short and precise. There's definitely a plot, there's a story, there's a concept, there's a climax within the comic. But it's also contingent with the illustrations inside of a comic book. Very elaborate, very colorful, really in your face, right? So there's some similarities there, but clearly when you come to writing, you're looking at like the storytelling ability that's implemented within these comics and how they're really able, along with the illustrations, to really like stretch out and really put finesse to the story itself. I just wanted to enlighten you on some comics that kind of I pull from inspiration from. These are my favorite comics of all time that I'm going to show you. This one is not a particular one. This is just it's mainly illustrations just to show the basically the interaction between Batman and the Joker. As you guys know, Joker being his arch nemesis. You also know, too, by just looking at different footage of the studio, you know I'm a huge Batman fan. I love Batman, Joker, and Harley Quinn. They're my three favorite characters. So I tend to pull from there. I'm more of a DC fan than Marvel. I don't really got a whole lot going on with Marvel or Dark Horse or some of these other different comic ventures. I'm a pretty simple dude. Batman's the way to go. But some that I pull from, if I pull them out, you have one that came out not too long ago, and it's called The Last Night on Earth. And it's a very unique take on Batman and the telling of his story. Batman, you pretty much know, is kind of like a man on the edge, right? You know, it doesn't take much for him to kind of cross that fine line, even though he upholds justice and he's out to get the bad guys. But he's not that far away from being crazy himself. If you look at his rogue of villains, a lot of them are deranged in one way, shape, or form. Hence the Joker. So this one was particularly good because it's more like a psychological thriller. And it deals with Batman going into different dimensions. And it actually shows him having a partnership with the Joker. Basically, the Joker is like his guide while he's in this like alternate reality. And just from the psychological standpoint with this book, or with this comic, I definitely pull from, because I'm a very analytical, I'm a very deep thinker, and I tend to try to portray that a lot in my writings. So pulling something like this, where a story is just so based off that kind of the psychological, like playing mind games with you as you're reading through it and you're going through it. I'm not per se trying to do that in my poetry or short stories, but I'm definitely trying to allow the reader to expand their perspective, right? To get out of their comfort zone. Make them feel a little unsettled, maybe a little bit. Make their skin cringe a little bit is my intentions, without really like going over the top. This is another one that's kind of like fits that mold as well. Definitely one of my favorites. It's called The Batman Who Laughs. And this is definitely like a very shocking, very psychological in nature. And this is like a version of Batman that basically has just completely went unhinged and turned into basically a psychopath. And yes, it can get graphic. I don't really hone in too much on just that aspect of the comics. It's just the dialogue, the way they flesh out the story. Believe it or not, even though it's very shocking in nature, you can still pull some elements that can be to experiences that you went through and that you can incorporate into your writing in a very subtle way. Clearly, the beauty of writing is just like any other art. You could be as free as you want to be. But even something that could be like shocking in nature, like I said, you can still pull from it and make the correlation and write it in a way when you come to your manuscript. Write it in a way where people can vibe with it and get an understanding of it. And still doesn't pull away from what your true purpose and intent is with your writing. This is definitely like in my top 3. This is called Doomsday Clock. And this story is centered around, I don't know if you're familiar with this character, Dr. Manhattan of the Watchmen series. And Superman. If I remember correctly, I do believe it has other characters from the DC world in here. I think it has like a few of the villains. But it's mainly centered around Dr. Manhattan and Superman, as you can see on the back. So what's so great from this, or what I can pull from this, as you can see how it looks inside. What I can pull from here is the fact that they're pulling 2 different characters from 2 different comic series. You know, Dr. Manhattan is part of the Watchmen. He's a main character in that series. And then Superman, clearly everybody knows him, correct? So the fact that they're able to implement these 2 different characters, they come from 2 different worlds, 2 different universes, and then they were able to make a coherent story, that's something that I could pull from, especially with my short stories, if I want to incorporate multiple genres. If I'm trying to incorporate a little bit of horror with fantasy, maybe a little bit of that psychological thriller with like suspense. Maybe something sci-fi mixed with something else. This is a nice template that I use, that I refer to, because they did an outstanding job. This storyline is amazing. I definitely recommend this for anyone. Even if you're not a comic book enthusiast, I think you will appreciate the storyline with this and how in-depth it is. It's definitely one of the best. It's in my top 3. But the way they were able to incorporate these 2 things is pretty fantastic. And then I just have a medley down here. Not so much this one. I mean, I like this one. This is actually a collection of different short comics. This is from Harley Quinn. And then I have one here for Batman and the Joker, where it kind of puts a little bit of insight on each character and how they got to where they're at. This is great for like character development, reading such comics like this to really kind of flesh out and really put some specifics when it comes to your main characters in your writing. This is another great one. This is called Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. This is actually a part 1 and a part 2 to the series. And this tells the story. I love the artwork in here. It's kind of like that deco style. But this tells the story of Batman when he grew older. He's very much up in years. He's training a protege. And Gotham seems to run amok. And he's having this battle within himself, whether he wants to continue on being the Batman, or should he just rely on the city itself to save themselves, right? So I love this one because there's multiple layers as far as the characters are concerned in there. And it really shows, with Batman being the central character, the different levels when it comes to his personality, the different levels where it comes to like his mentality as far as like how he wants to go about his life from that point onward. And that's a great element that you could put into, again, with your story of just tying everything together and not being afraid to put these layers in your writing, you know, to show like your variety and to show that you're willing as a writer to kind of like go into like different nuances and different perspectives. You know, you shouldn't go into an art form with this sense of fear and dread, right? You should definitely be like all in. I have this total freedom to go in and do different things. And then the last one I have here, that's one of my favorites, called Batman: The Three Jokers. And this one kind of does... This was interesting because it kind of shows 3 different sides of each character. And it kind of shows like this different... shows the similarities that basically Joker is trying to show to Batman that, yo, you're not that far off from me, man. So as much hatred that you have toward me, you're pretty much on the precipice of just being like myself. So that just goes back to what I was just saying about character development and not trying to make your characters and your stories, or even if you have a central theme or character within your poetry, to make them one-dimensional. You know, add layers, add different aspects, perspectives to your character. You know what I mean? Again, don't show no fear. Just put it out there. Try out different things. And see what happens. You know, that's the best to it. Also, too, I'm not a big fan of it. There's probably people out there big fans of it. I'm not personally, but you probably can draw some inspiration from... Let me see if I'm doing this right. Let me bring it back over this way. We have what are called, I think I'm pronouncing it right, manga. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, good to go. So you got manga. If you're not familiar with manga, it comes from the world of anime. There's only like probably about a few, not even a few, probably like 2 or 3 that I really have gravitated toward that I seem to like. Overall, I'm not a big fan, but they're great because their stories are very in-depth. So if you're looking to like actually start writing your first novel, this actually might not be a bad medium for you to go to, because their stories and their character development is so in-depth and so innovative and so over the top. A lot of aspects in there are very abstract, but it provides really good storytelling. So obviously for your novels, that's what you want to really shine through with your book. It's the storytelling aspect. And mangas definitely do that. So this is an interesting one only because of the way it's presented. It's called That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. The fact is you actually had to read this backwards, which is like pretty phenomenal to me, the way they have this set up. And again, it sort of looks like in a comic book style. And I'm not saying comic books can't be as in-depth in their storytelling as a manga, but manga tends to be even more, there's a level of complexity to it that I think if you're an inspiring writer, that's something you can appreciate and that you can learn from. So that's about it, guys. I just wanted to give you guys some enlightenment when it comes to how to gain inspiration. You can get it from more than one medium. Even something that doesn't seem like a possible way for you to get inspiration, in actuality, you can. In my case, it's comic books. So I hope this was insightful for you inspiring writers out there going about your writing projects. For you inspiring poets, go out there and the world's your oyster. Make the most of it. Right? So that's about it. I think I covered all the points. You know who it is. This is CRUZ of Olympian Multimedia. And the only thing, well, I'm going to leave you with two things you need to do. Two. Number one, read and inspire. You know? Sort of like what I'm trying to do now. Right? Small little one. And the other thing is, get things done. Check you later.